Hey, ghoul friends. It's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of paranormal folklore from Latin American cultures. Welcome back again. Thank you so much for being here, and if this is your first time, welcome to the circle. We welcome you with open arms and tentacles and antennas and whatever creepy crawly appendages everybody in our coven may have. The spooky season rush is over. As you all know, it kicked my ass, but I made it through. I'm okay. I'm fine. A little tired, a little haggard, but hey, we are approaching the end of the year. So with that being said, we have one more event coming up that I know of. Unless somebody wants to surprise me and get me in for another event before the year's over, please let me know. Or hey, we got a plan for Q1, 2, 3, and 4 already. Let's start booking next year. But to end this year, I think my last event will be the Strange and Extraordinary Fest, which is happening on November 22nd here in Austin. You can get your tickets by visiting strangeandextraordinaryfest.com. And there's also a link in my link tree. That's linktr.ee/susto. And again, this is the event that I will be tabling and paneling at and emceeing. So if you want to see me come act a fool, please make your way out. And don't forget, there is a virtual option for this event as well. I think that gives you access to, of course, not the vendor market because that's in person to buy your goodies in person, but for the panels and the speakers and stuff, that is what the virtuals option is for. So once again, visit strangeandextraordinaryfest.com to get your tickets there. As I mentioned, December is coming up. Listen, I cannot believe next week is already mid-November, which is, I don't know what it is about the Burr months. They're my favorite months out of the year, and they just go the fastest. Maybe because that's when I'm having the most fun, and it just all goes by in a blur. But you know what? Justice for the Burr months. They need to be longer. Maybe it's the time change. I don't know, whatever it is. But with that being said, December is next month, which means it is time for Susto's annual Swapathon, which is one of my favorite things, not only because I finally get some time off, even though I'm working in the background on things, but because that is the time that I bring shows or creators to you all that you may not have heard of for whatever reason. Most times it's people that I have worked with, and then we decide, hey, let's go ahead and do this. Either way, I'm excited to bring you all some shows, some creators that maybe will be your first introduction to or that you'll get a revisit for, and I hope that you enjoy that. With that being said, I think we have all 4 slots filled up for this year. I hope I do already. I need to double check that. But even for next year, if you want to make those connections, say, hey, Ayden, meet so-and-so, so-and-so, meet Ayden. You do this cool thing every year. Get them on the list for next year. Let's get the roster going already. It's never too early to prepare. As a Virgo rising, it's never too early to prepare, even though I wish I was more prepared more times. But anyway, just want to let you know that will be happening. I am taking the month of December off. If you were not here for last year or the year before, it's something that I am doing every year now. It's like my vacation. It's kind of like when the season is over, but not really. I've never really called the seasons on Susto seasons. I don't say this is season 1, 2, or 3. Maybe I will go back and retroactively fix the way that that's listed online. But that's just the kind of the way that it works. I go with the seasons of the earth. I let Mother tell me what to do. So again, just wanted to give you a warning. Susto is not done. It's not going anywhere. That's just kind of my rest and reset for the year. In the meantime, though, please use that time. You are going to be with your families. These next few months is when it's usually still when families get together, and winter holidays as well. While you're with your families, ask them their stories. Say, hey, have you heard of this podcast called Susto? This really strange person hosts it and loves to hear people's scary stories. So this is the perfect time to collect those stories from your loved ones, and then you can send them to me by visiting my website, sustopodcast.com, or it's on the link tree as well, and hit that submit a story, tell me a story button, and I will read it on a Letters from the Beyond episode. I'm just saying, I'm priming you to get ready to bring that conversation up, because if I know us, I know it's going to happen. And throughout the holiday season and all year long, really, you can follow along on social media for any and all updates on the show. That is at Susto Podcast on every single platform. Okay, with those updates out of of the way, we're going to go through some Spotify comments quickly. The first one is from Anaí on the Lost Edge tattoo episode. So that is where I got my tattoo on camera. I interviewed my artist and the other artists in the shop. And that was also a publicly available video. So you can go to youtube.com/@sustopodcast. And the video is up there for everybody to view. Normally I save video versions of episodes like this one for best school friends on Patreon, patreon.com/sustopodcast. But that one is available for everybody to watch. So Anaí says, I love the Spanish. You are very well. Thank you so much. I was very nervous about putting that episode out because of my Spanish, but I said, fuck it, we're going to do it. People will know exactly how pocho I am. So I tried my best and I hope that you'll enjoyed it. Thank you, Anaí. Anaí continues, just a question. When you meant that his parents supported him or endured him? Okay, I already know where this is going. Because you said soportaron, which I've been told means like tolerate/endure. Yes, you're right. Apoyar means support. Just wanted to ask. I'm a bit confused. Love the podcast. I did, in fact, like I said, I'm very pocho. So I did, in fact, confuse those two words. And even in the moment, I was like, I know this is not the word, but I want to say Gabriel gave me some sort of like affirmation, like, yeah, sure, you're saying it right. So I think he knew what I meant, but you know, for the sake of the podcast, you all might not know what I was aiming to say, but I did in fact mean apoyar. And the thing is, I know that word. I've used it before, so I don't know what happened to my brain. Again, it's like I say that I form the thoughts in my head in Spanish, and then when I try to get them out, it all leaves my body, it leaves my brain, and it does not compute. But yes, you are exactly right. Thank you for that, and thank you for supporting my episode and my terrible Spanish, but not really. I'm gonna give myself a little pat on the back for at least trying it and doing the best I could. The next comment we have is a shorter one, and this is on the Antumia episode, and Christy said, wow, using teachings of the past to move us forward. That was beautiful. The sparkling heart emoji. Thank you, Christy. There are definitely lessons in so many of these stories, if not all of them. And even if it's not what the intended lesson was supposed to be for some of them, because as you know, many of them are about just getting kids to stay in line and behave, there are other lessons to be learned when you start to peel back the layers. So thank you for that. Those are all the comments on Spotify. And speaking of Spotify, I want to go ahead and talk about something that is happening on there. So Spotify is running ads recruiting agents for ICE. And these ads target vulnerable populations. They promise signing bonuses and normalize fear and intimidation. Spotify claims that these ads comply with their policy, but the truth is streaming hate is not neutral. It's a choice. That is from a website or a group called Indivisible. I made a post on social media maybe sometime last week, and I tagged them where I could. So you can go and see more about what is happening on their website and what the call to action is. People are being asked to cancel their Spotify memberships, as I, Ayden, from Susto, I have canceled my Spotify membership because that is just 100% unacceptable. And people are being asked to do that until Spotify terminates all ICE and DHS advertising contracts. I want to make it very clear that while Susto is published on Spotify, it is one of the many platforms that it gets pushed out to. Susto is hosted, the actual, like the data for the show, it lives on a different website. It lives on Spreaker, and you can actually listen to podcasts on there. There are so many options for listening to podcasts. It doesn't have to be just on Spotify. It feels counterintuitive to tell you all to step away from Spotify, but if you are looking for options, there are plenty of other platforms to listen to music, to podcasts, to audiobooks. You could even just, again, cancel your membership so that they are not getting our money. You may hear those ads, the ads may run, but at least they are not getting your dollars. And if you would like to, please feel free to tag Spotify in a post, that website that I mentioned, and I will link it in the description for this show. They have a social media toolkit where you can download graphics and post them. I went ahead and posted on Susto, and I tagged Spotify. There are many artists and creators who are speaking out against this, as we should, because we have a platform, because Spotify is one of the pillars of that platform. We need to let them know that this is completely unacceptable, that it is not okay to push racist propaganda, and that we won't stand for it, and we will not send them our money for that reason until, and maybe even after, because I know that there are plenty of other issues with Spotify that people have had. But inadvertently supporting an agency that is abducting people, because that is what they are doing. They're abducting people and ripping families apart and harming communities. It's unacceptable. We do not stand for it. As always, as I have said for as long as I can remember, abolish ICE. Fuck ICE. If you work with them, for them, if you align yourself with them, you're a loser, and I don't want you listening to this. Plain and simple. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir. Many of you who already listen to Susto feel the same. So it's like screaming into an echo chamber, but hey, whatever. Hopefully that will inform the decisions that you make, or maybe you will, with that link in the description below, you'll have a resource to share with people to let others know what's going on. Because again, we don't do that here. Let me finish my thought from earlier is yes, Susto is published. It's one of the many platforms on Spotify, but it is not hosted on Spotify. And as far as I know, as far as I have tried to do, I do not run governmental ads on Susto for this reason, because I don't want certain things to be promoted on Susto with Susto's name attached to it. So a really quick insight, just the way that it works is because Susto is whatever platform a podcast is hosted on, Susto is on Spreaker, there are different categories of advertisements that you can choose to allow or not allow to run. Governmental advertisements have never been allowed on Susto. So if for some reason you have heard one in the past or you hear one, please let me know, because that means that they are finding a way to slip through. They are maybe miscategorizing the type of advertisement it is. And if there is anything to be done about it, I will try and find a way, because that's not how that works. They're breaking the rules there. And that's, if they're miscategorizing it, it needs to be brought up to somebody's attention. Because like I said, I've never allowed those ads, regardless of who they were coming from, to be run on Susto. So again, with that being said, do what you will with that information. But as always, fuck ICE. We're going to put that down, take a deep breath, and we're going to get into today's episode, which is about the Abchanchu. Rolando had been on the road since dawn. The world around him was a cathedral of stone and sky, with the high Andes mountains stretching forever, serrated peaks like broken teeth biting into the clouds. The sun hadn't yet burned through the morning mist, and the air shimmered thin and sharp, a cold that lived in the bones. His small pickup truck crawled along a dirt road carved into the mountainside, with one lane clinging to cliffs that dropped away into nothingness. Below, valleys folded and refolded into a gray-green sea of slopes, where llamas grazed like ghosts in the distance. The road wound upward through switchbacks and blind corners, its edges dusted with frost. It was beautiful. Heartbreakingly so, the kind of beauty that humbled you, made you small. But it was also a place that could swallow a person whole without a sound. He had told himself this trip would be good for him. It was a chance to clear his head, deliver supplies to a mining camp 2 days up the range, and feel a little less stuck. He liked being alone. The mountains didn't ask questions. They didn't judge, they simply watched. But the warnings still echoed in the back of his mind. Don't travel alone through the cerros at night. Keep your doors locked. And if you see an old man walking by the road, don't stop. People in the village had said it with half smiles, half serious, as if teasing him for being a city boy. He'd laughed it off, saying the only things to fear out there were bandits and bad weather. Still, he brought his pistol. By mid-morning, the fog had lifted. The road somehow narrowed even more, barely hugging the side of the mountain. One wrong turn could mean a plummet into a bottomless mountainside. Rolando tightened his grip on the wheel and slowed down. He hadn't seen another vehicle in hours. No one lived up here except shepherds and the occasional miner. Then, he saw something ahead. A man stood by the roadside, leaning on a stick. He looked impossibly small against the rock face. He was hunched, wrapped in a torn poncho that fluttered in the wind. His face was nearly hidden by a wide, dust-stained hat. Rolando hesitated. The man didn't wave, didn't call for help, just stood there. watching. Finally, Rolando rolled down the window. "Está bien, abuelo. You need help?" The old man turned his head slowly, as if the air itself resisted him. His eyes were shadowed, but Rolando could see the tremor in his hands. The man spoke, his voice rasping like dry leaves.
"My home, up the mountain, too far to walk."
His words were slow, broken as if each one took effort to lift from his chest. Rolando glanced at the road. It wound up the slope like a serpent, sharp switchbacks disappearing into cloud. He sighed and opened the passenger door. "Está bien, abuelo. Get in, I'll take you." They climbed for what felt like hours. The truck jolted over rocks and washed out gullies, rattling every bolt. Rolando tried to make small talk. "So, how long you lived up here?" The old man's voice came low and dry.
"Long time.
"You got any family?"
Gone."
Rolando chuckled awkwardly. You don't talk much, huh?"
"No need."
Something about his voice made Rolando's skin prickle. It was too calm, too patient, almost like the man was saving his breath for something important. He risked a glance at his passenger. The old man's eyes were fixed ahead, unblinking. His hands were folded in his lap, but the fingers twitched now and then, like they had a mind of their own. The road narrowed again, and Rolando focused on driving. By late afternoon, clouds rolled in fast. A storm was building, looking like dark curtains sliding across the peaks. Rolando checked the dashboard clock. They should have seen a village by now. A few houses, a fence, something. But there was nothing ahead. Only rock and fog. "Abuelo," he said, forcing a smile. "You said your home was up here, right? How much further?" The old man slowly turned his head.
"We are close."
Something in the way he said it made the hair rise on the back of Rolando's neck. Still, he drove on. Minutes later, the road ended in a flat clearing of stone and dust. No houses, no fences, just a black mouth of a cave cut into the mountain. Rolando frowned. This is your home?"
"Yes. Come in. I thank you. I make food."
The old man was already opening his door. His movements were deliberate, almost mechanical. Rolando hesitated. The air here felt heavier, colder, as if it came from inside the cave itself. Maybe next time, abuelo. I still have to..."
"Please."
The single word was like a weight. Rolando felt foolish for being nervous. He'd given the man a ride. Maybe a few minutes wouldn't hurt. He reached behind the seat and took his pistol, just in case, and followed the old man. The air inside the cave was colder and felt still, dead. Rolando's breath came out in clouds that hung too long before fading. He could still smell the truck's engine oil on his jacket, the dust of the road clinging to him like memory. The old man shuffled away, his back bent, voice rasping low.
"This way, hijo. This way."
Again, Rolando hesitated. His flashlight beam trembled across the stone, catching what looked like bones. Small ones. Animal, maybe. Maybe. The old man turned, his shadow stretching impossibly tall against the cave wall. Rolando opened his mouth to speak, but the words froze. The man was smiling. A slow, cracking smile that showed teeth too sharp, too long. Then the skin on his face began to ripple, veins rising like roots beneath the flesh. The old man lunged, Rolando stumbled back, firing instinctively. The shot hit the creature square in the chest. It staggered, but didn't fall. For a moment, Rolando's heart soared with hope. Maybe he'd stopped it. But then, the Abchanchu looked down at the smoking hole in its chest and smiled wider. He fired again, and again. The echoes bounced off the stone until it sounded like the mountain itself was laughing at him. The Abchanchu didn't flinch. It took a step forward, then another. Each footfall was soft, as deliberate as a hunter closing distance not out of haste, but hunger. Rolando turned and ran. He could see the faint glow of daylight ahead from the mouth of the cave. He was going to make it.
Run, hijo.
He looked back just long enough to see it not walking, but gliding, almost floating, its body unfurling into something massive, horned, wings of shadow brushing the walls. Rolando burst out into the light, stumbling into the gravel and dust. He turned and raised the pistol again, hands shaking, tried to aim, but he was out of bullets. The Abchanchu emerged in front of him, framed by the cave's darkness with red eyes gleaming like coals. It was smiling again. It let him crawl away a few feet before stepping closer. Its voice came soft, mocking, like a lullaby.
Almost.
Then, in a blur, it was on him. Rolando kicked, clawed, struck with his fists, but the creature pinned him easily, its strength inhuman, absolute. The Abchanchu leaned close, the stench of rot and blood thick in its breath, and whispered,
You should have kept driving.
Then the bite, a deep tearing, and Rolando's world went dark. The last thing he saw was the creature's face, shifting. The old man's features returned as if nothing had changed. It licked the blood from its lips and smiled down at him.
Fool,
it said softly, as Rolando's body went still. Hours later, the mountain road lay quiet again. The truck had gone missing from outside the cave, leaving an empty mountaintop. And inside the cave, nothing stirred. Sometimes travelers say when the wind cuts just right through those peaks, you can hear a voice carried down from the heights. A slow, broken voice, calling out for help.
My home, up the mountain.
And if you stop to listen, or even if you stop to help, you'll see an old man standing by the road, hat pulled low against the wind. And when he looks up, you'll see that his mouth is stained red. Welcome back, old friends. Thank you so much for listening to that story, and a big thank you to Jeffrey for helping me write this one once again. We're going to go ahead and jump into some Abchanchu myths. So the first one, this is from a urban legends mystery and myth.com. This is an entry simply called the Abchanchu, Bolivia's ancient Andean vampire legend. So again, as it says here, this story comes to us from Bolivia, and this says, the night in the Andes is colder than you expect. Mist curls along the lonely mountain road, and your lantern's flame struggles against the darkness. Ahead, you notice a figure hunched on the ground, a frail old man wrapped in tattered clothes. He groans as if in pain, one arm stretched toward you. Instinct tells you to help. But in Bolivian legend, this is exactly what Abchanchu wants, because the moment you lean down to offer a hand, the old man's eyes glow red, his teeth sharpen, and you realize too late that pity has led you straight into the arms of a vampire. So, obviously, this is a vampire story or a version of a vampire story, right? Because as we know, there are so many, and we're going to go through a few of them later that they talk about here. But the first ones, there were the first creatures that came to mind, or the first susto episodes that came to mind, of course, were the Pistaco, which I know is something similar, the vampiress of Pisco, Peru, of course, and the Tío. I think the Tío is this entity that the miners in Bolivia pray to in tandem with their Catholic beliefs. So just some interesting things to think about, and I will put those in the description notes below so that you all can check those out if you want to. Oh, and of course, I almost forgot the Tlahuelpuchi, which is one of my favorite life stories to tell. So I don't know how I almost forgot that, but those four, they will be in the description notes. You can, if you haven't heard them, you can go back and listen to them, or if you feel like doing a susto vampire tour, then you can listen to those groups of episodes after this one. So this continues. Who or what is Abchanchu? The Abchanchu is a vampire-like figure from Bolivian folklore. Unlike the suave, seductive vampires of European legend, Abchanchu does not lure victims with charm or beauty. Instead, it preys on compassion. So again, this idea of seeing this elderly person on the side of the road. And I will say, I didn't see anything about the typical assigned genders to this creature. I've seen like elderly man when we looked up pictures and stuff. A lot of the depictions were like this really small older man. I didn't see anything about the Abchanchu being only one gender. So who knows? Again, this is one of the things that could be prescribed to any sort of representation. But for the sake of this episode, we will probably be referring to Abchanchu as he. And so this continues, often described as a frail elderly traveler. Again, they're not using a specific gender here. The Abchanchu disguises itself as helpless to trick passersby into approaching. When its victims lean close, the vampire strikes, draining blood until the traveler is left lifeless on the road. It is feared not only as a monster, but also as a warning that evil often wears the mask of weakness, and kindness can be twisted into a fatal mistake. Which, it's so interesting because I feel like I try to help people when I see people in need, right? I will say I've never picked up a hitchhiker. I don't think I've ever really seen a hitchhiker, but I think maybe because of stories like this, you know, we see other like horror movies or thrillers, or we hear the stories where we're basically told not to do that. So, you know, even if you consider yourself an empathetic person or somebody who wants to help people in need, there's still that fear in the back of your mind. You know what? I lied. I did give this man a ride one time in my hometown from the Walmart to, I forgot where, like somewhere in the town. And I remember telling him, because I agreed to give him a ride, and we were walking to my car, and then I stopped and I looked at him dead in the eye and I said, "Do you have a knife?" Or I was like, "You don't have a weapon or something, do you?" I was like, "Because I don't feel like fighting today." And he was like, No, man. I swear to God. He's like, I just need a ride. And I was like, all right, get in the car. But also, for all he knows, I could have been the weirdo who was going to hurt him. So, you know, sometimes you just got to trust in people. I think that is the only time that I've given a stranger a ride like that. And it worked out. So, okay. He was not an Abchanchu. I was safe. But this continues. The origin of the story and its variations. The Abchanchu is deeply rooted in the Andean oral tradition of Bolivia, though variations of the story appear across South America. So this talks about its kind of two different roots. So there's the Andean roots. Some folklorists suggest that the Abchanchu may have pre-Columbian origins tied to earlier myths of demons or hungry spirits that lurked along the trade roads through the mountains. And we're going to talk about that idea a little bit later here. But then there's also, of course, as always, good old colonial Spanish influence. And this says, when European vampire tales spread through South America, they blended with indigenous lore, shaping the Abchanchu into a more familiar blood-drinking figure. So it seems like this kind of vampiric aspect to the Abchanchu due to Spanish influence, and that's not what like the OG story is. But this also says that while most stories focus on the frail old man disguise, some variations claim the Abchanchu can take animal forms or vanish into the mist after an attack. And again, we're going to bring that up a little bit later. I'm just planting all the Abchanchu seeds right now. This says the legend endured because of the dangers of travel through Bolivia's remote mountain passes. Bandits, illness, and exposure often claim lives, and stories of a vampire lying in wait offered a supernatural explanation for why some never came home. So again, there's this idea that I think we've seen before where people, and again, I mentioned the Tlahuelpuchi earlier, that people use sometimes these creatures or these stories to explain their or process their own grief or their own trauma. So with the Tlahuelpuchi, it was the infanticide that happened overnight in that community. And with this, it seems like people are, for whatever reason, they're traversing these mountainsides or this mountainous region, and then their loved ones pass away when they're doing that, when they're traveling. And so they're like, they were taken by the Abchanchu, or the Abchanchu got a hold of them, right? And this page continues. It talks about modern sightings or encounters, and that's kind of a continuation of that topic. It says, while the Abchanchu is firmly rooted in folklore, occasional encounters are still whispered. Travelers found pale and collapsed on lonely roads are sometimes attributed to the Abchanchu, especially if no illness or robbery explains death. Some modern stories speak of roadside beggars in Bolivia who seem to appear and disappear strangely, vanishing into mist when ignored. And researchers of vampire folklore point to Abchanchu as proof that the idea of blood-drinking predators exists across cultures, not just in Europe. Because, of course, I think many of the depictions or the stories of vampires come from European influence, but it would make sense then that Spanish influence on this story, right? So this is what I was really interested in on this page. They talk about similar vampires and blood-drinking creatures around the world, and there's a list of them here. This one, I'm going to go through these, and this first one is the Strigoi from Romania. That sounds like I said that right? I don't know. Strigoi. I feel like I've heard that kind of accent, that Romanian, of course, with like many vampire movies, right? But this says, these restless spirits are said to rise from the grave to torment their families, spreading diseases and drinking blood. Unlike the elegant vampires of fiction, Strigoi are grotesque revenants, corpse-like and hungry. They are considered the direct ancestors of Bram Stoker's Dracula and are feared in rural Romania, where villagers sometimes exhume suspected corpses to prevent a Strigoi outbreak. So there's an actual influence on communities to stop these things from coming out because of their belief in them. This next one is the Pontianak, which is from Malaysia/Indonesia, and it says, a terrifying ghost of a woman who died in childbirth, which reminds me of I think it was the Tsitsimime, which is a story of people who passed away during childbirth, that their souls became these kind of like warrior-like deities in the sky. They were the stars. I think that's the one. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this continues. At first, she appears as a stunningly beautiful woman, drawing in men with her long black hair and pale skin, but once lured close, she reveals a ghastly corpse-like face and long nails that tear flesh. The Pontianak drains blood and even devours internal organs, making her one of the most feared vampiric beings in Southeast Asia. Ooh, super cool. This continues. The Asanbosam, which is from West Africa and the Ashanti people, lurking in the forest of Ghana and surrounding regions. The Asanbosam is described as a monstrous vampire with iron teeth and hook-like feet. It perches in treetops, dropping down to snatch and wary hunters or travelers. Its method mirrors the Abchuncha's ambush on lonely roads, attacking when victims least expect it. That is terrifying. Imagine just walking through forest, jungle, whatever it is, and this thing just comes down and snatches you to eat you. This continues, and these are some ideas that I might circle back to for future episodes, but this is from Colombia, and this is La Patasola. It says, another South American vampire legend. La Patasola begins as a vision of beauty, often appearing to lone men in the jungle. Once she has her victim's attention, she transforms into a hideous one-legged monster with sharp fangs. She then drinks the victim's blood, sometimes consuming their flesh. Her legend, like Abchanchu's, is a warning about deception and misplaced trust. Also, I'm going to say this now. If at any point I have said Abchuncha instead of Abchanchu, please pretend that I did not, because I feel like I maybe just said it wrong right now, and I swear to God, I cannot go back and record everything. I don't have the time. So I'm just going to say that now. If you heard it, no, you didn't. The next one here is the Saucoyant from Trinidad, Guyana, and Venezuela. It says, a witch-like vampire who lives as an old woman by day, but at night sheds her skin and transforms into a fiery ball of light. In this form, she slips through cracks and keyholes to suck the blood of sleeping victims. If she drinks too much, the victim dies. To defeat her, folklore says you must find her discarded skin and destroy it with salt or fire. fire, trapping her in her fiery form forever. This one sounds really cool. I would love to do a story on this one. This has so many elements from other things, right? So there's this witch, first of all, a witch who can transform into anything, right? You think of Tlalpuchi, Lechusa, just general witches that can transform into, like I said here, a ball of fire or a ball of light. And then you have, again, those general, in Mexico, they say witches can turn into balls of fire. The Tlalpuchi can turn into mist or a ball of light and travel that way. But this, I really, really like this detail. I think it's so interesting that to defeat her, you need to find the skin that she shed when she transformed and destroy the skin so that she cannot return to the human form. And I'm assuming that it's not sustainable for her to survive as this ball of light, right? This fiery ball of light. So it's very, very interesting there. The second to last one here is the Chonchon from Chile and Argentina. It says, one of the strangest vampire figures of South America, the Chonchon is said to be a sorcerer who transforms into a flying human head. Its large ears flap like wings, carrying it through the night as it seeks victims. The Chonchon drinks blood and spreads terror with its screeching cries. In some regions, hearing the sound of the Chonchon is said to be a death omen. So very much like hearing the cries of a Lechusa, of La Llorona, hearing the whistle of El Silbón, again, with this idea of sound and these monsters or these creatures or spirits that if you hear them, it's a bad omen. Just hearing it is bad luck enough. And the last one here is the Pistaco from Peru and Bolivia. It says, though not a vampire in the traditional sense, the Pistaco is a frightening Andean legend about a creature, or sometimes a man, that drains both fat and blood from its victims. Again, like I mentioned earlier, the Pistaco, rooted in colonial fears and exploitation by Spaniards, the Pistaco endures as a cultural warning about outsiders preying on local communities. Its link to blood drinking and its Bolivian setting make it a close cousin to the Abchanchu. So again, thank you Urban Legends, Mystery and Myth.com for the entry on the Abchanchu and this amazing comprehensive list of all these other similar creatures from around the world. Okay, the next entry that we have here is a quick Wikipedia entry. This is really, really short. It's literally one sentence. It says, Abchanchu is a legendary Bolivian vampire who shapeshifts into the form of a helpless elderly traveler. When a passerby offers to help him, Abchanchu victimizes them and drinks their blood. The victim dies of blood loss or disease. Very simple. That is the elevator pitch, the tell us a little bit about yourself for the Abchanchu. The one after that is this is a academic link. This is from a book, and this one's also very, very short. This is from Gale eBooks, I believe. And this is from a book titled The Encyclopedia of Vampires and Werewolves, 2nd edition, by a Rosemary Ellen Gilly, I believe. And it's on the first page. It starts with, literally, it's like an encyclopedia entry. It's a really quick entry. And similar to the Wikipedia entry, this says, Abchanchu, Bolivian vampire. The Abchanchu pretends to be a kindly old man who loses his way. His well-meaning, helpful victims are either stricken with a fatal disease or are sucked dry of their blood while they are asleep. And I wasn't able to find any other mention of the Abchanchu from what was available online about this text. So I think it was literally just, it was listing through, these are all the different kinds of vampires and werewolves around the world, which I should find this book because I would love to go through that. The next one is from cryptidindex.com. It's titled Abchanchu, the Vampire of Bolivian Folklore. And it says, among the myriad of cryptids and legends scattered across the globe, the Abchanchu stands out as a sinister figure from Bolivian folklore. Often described as a shape-shifting vampire, this malevolent entity preys on the vulnerable, luring unsuspecting travelers into its deadly grasp. Known for its cunning and ruthlessness, the Abchanchu's dark reputation has cemented its place in South American mythology as both a cautionary tale and as a symbol of humanity's fears. And this one, it breaks down all of the Abchanchu again. So there may be some repeats here, but as always, we want to get as many different perspectives, right? So this one talks about its physical description, and it says the Abchanchu's true form is rarely, if ever, described in concrete detail. And we've already been seeing that through these resources that we're going to. It says, legends suggest that it has the ability to shapeshift, often appearing as an old and frail individual to deceive its victims. This disguise is effective in eliciting sympathy as travelers feel compelled to aid the seemingly helpless figure. However, once its prey is close enough, the Abchanchu reveals its predatory nature, striking with precision and leaving no chance for escape. So again, it's preying on and counting on that sympathy and that kindness from its victims, which I think compared to other creatures and cryptids and what have you that have been featured on Susto is an interesting take, because most of them they rely on like trickery, which I mean, this is trickery, right? It's decepting people and using their kindness against them, but it like tricking people in other ways, like with the sound thing, right? Usually like with El Silbon's whistle, La Llorona's cries, some I think La Ciguanaba with the backward facing feet. Things are opposite of what they seem. So if you hear something farther away, that means it's closer. Then if you hear it closer, that means it's farther away. And with the footprints, if you see them, because the footprints are backwards, if you see them walking away, then it's actually walking towards you, and vice versa. So, or just straight up hunting, right? Versus this, the Abchanchu doesn't really, its hunting is very chill. I don't know how to say that in a more elegant way, but it just sits and waits, you know, and it lets its victims do the work. This continues on this site. It says origins and legends. The origins of the Abchanchu are deeply rooted in Bolivian folklore, particularly in the Andean regions where the harsh landscapes and isolated roads create an ideal setting for tales of terror. Stories of the Abchanchu were likely passed down orally, serving as warnings to travelers to remain cautious and wary of strangers. Some interpretations suggest that the Abchanchu represents more than just a mythical predator. It is thought to symbolize the dangers of isolation and the vulnerability of individuals in remote areas. Others argue that it serves as a metaphor for treachery, a reminder that not everything is as it seems, and danger often hides behind a facade of innocence. I'm going to skip down this page to a portion of it that says scientific explanations and theories. And this says skeptics often seek to rationalize tales of the Abchanchu by attributing them to psychological and cultural factors. The cryptid's guise as an old and frail individual may reflect a deeply ingrained fear of vulnerability and deception. Again, we keep getting this idea over and over again. Others suggest that sightings of the Abchanchu could be explained by encounters with individuals suffering from severe illnesses or conditions that give them a ghastly appearance, thus fueling this legend. This continues. Another theory posits that the Abchanchu legend served as a practical warning to travelers. By instilling fear of strangers and the unknown, the story may have discouraged risky behaviors and encouraged vigilance, which would have been crucial for survival in remote and perilous environments. I think also it could serve, yes, to travelers, but to specifically travelers who are from that area. They brought up the Pistaco earlier, and we know that there is Spanish influence on the origins of this story itself. And so it's that kind of warning of outsiders or strangers, not only just people you may not know from your own community, but strangers to the community. And more specifically, in this instance, colonizers, right? Okay, and I have a link here. This isn't necessarily a source. We could have used it as one, but this is a comic. It's called the Abchanchu, and we're going to talk about that pronunciation next. But this is from, I believe, their artist. I'm not sure, you know, like authors have pen names. Is it the same thing for an artist? So either way, this is a comic, and it's a comic titled El Abchanchu, and I think the quote artist name is Minjosh, but I think their actual name, it's here at the bottom, and it was attributed to them in another page that I found that this art on, is Armin Castellon, which Armin, we have similar last names, Castellanos. What is up, primo? But if you're interested in looking this up, this is, it seems like it's maybe a comic site. It says in English 24 in 24, or 24 en 24, so 24en24.blogspot.com. And if you just search that with Abchanchu, then you should be able to find this. But yeah, it's a fun comic if you want to read through that. And I really like the art style and the way that they depicted the Abchanchu or Abchanchu, as we will delve into a bit deeper here about those different pronunciations. Jeff left a note for us here, and it says pre-colonial Abchanchu. These cave demon myths eventually merged with European vampire myths to become the modern day Abchanchu. First, we want to get an understanding of where specifically this is coming from. This is a website called aymara.org, and this was written by Jorge Pedraza Arpasi. Not only will the direct links for all of these be in the Susto Google Docs on Patreon, but Jorge has specifically asked that we link to aymara.org, so you will find a link to this page in the description notes. Jorge gave us a really, really neat insight into the Aymara people, and just to kind of tell you all a bit about them so we know a bit more about their perspective. This says, Aymara is a language spoken by approximately 1.6 million persons around the Titicaca Lake. More precisely, according to the last census of both Bolivia and Chile, both in 1992, and Peru in 1993, there are approximately 1.2 million Bolivian Aymara speakers, roughly 290,000 Peruvian speakers, and roughly 48,000 Chilean ones. All these speakers conform the Aymara people. In the province of Tupe, Yauyos, at 300 kilometers southeast of Lima City, are the last 600 speakers of Hakaru, which, in accordance to the M.J. Hardman, is a familiar but separate language from Aymara. However, in accordance to other language classification catalogs, Hakaru is only a dialectical variation from Aymara. The existence of Hakaru is an indicator that in ancient times, Aymara language spread in wide areas of the present Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, far away from the Titicaca Plateau. Examples of these areas are inside the present-day Peru, at Arequipa provinces, at Apurimac provinces, at Cusco provinces, at Puno Northeast provinces, and inside present Bolivia at Potosí, Cochabamba, and Oruro. So that's more so about their language. About the people themselves, this says that ethnically the Aymara people are from the same group who populated all the Americas since 1200 BC and who are mostly known as, quote, Indians. There are strong and deep ties between the Titicaca Lake and the Aymara people. Such ties begin with the name Titicaca, which comes from two Aymara words, which are titi, and here they say it's cat, and caca with Q's, which is gray color. That is, Titicaca means the gray cat. The Titicaca Plateau is over 12,000 feet above the sea level. Therefore, it should have a non-living climate, but the waters of the lake warm all the region, allowing to live millions of persons. Pedro Ciesa de Leon tells us that this plateau was the most populated territory of the entire Inca Empire. Now we have some really good background of who these people were, right? In this same site, they talk about the Anchucha in this segment about ancient religiosity or pre-Christian religion in this area. So up to the year 1550. Before that, though, it says, the distinct Aymara towns of the antiquity have had different local gods and thus various forms of religiosity. However, these local varieties were based on the two pillars of the Pan-Andean religiosity, as are the agricultural religiosity and the worship of the ancestors. So we see this in so many cultures, is the two strongest or the two main pillars of worship, religiosity, devotion, however you want to identify that, is usually always agricultural or earth-based and ancestors, or those that came before us who are dead. This continues. The ancient Aymara god Thunupa, who is the central icon of the stone sculpture of the Gateway of the Sun in Tiwanaku, personifies various agents of the nature of the sun, wind, rain, hail that can influence, for well or for worse, the agricultural production. So again, this entity that can influence crops, harvest, life, right? Another aspect of this agricultural religion is the goddess Pachamama, or the mother ground, the producer of the foods. This goddess / mother requires sacrifices, her favorite being the fetus of a llama. So I think that's where we got that kind of little detail of the ghost llamas at the beginning of this episode, which I think would make a cute little sticker, a llama that's a ghost. I don't know why in my head that's adorable. This continues. On the other hand, the worship of the ancestors was manifested in a material way in the construction of tomb shrines whose complexity was in agreement of the importance of the deceased. Okay, now we're going to talk about a bit the Abchanchu. And I swear to God, I know that I said it wrong again earlier, but you didn't hear that, right? Exactly. So this says, the local gods are the hills and the mountains regarded as guardians and protectors. This form of spirituality continues in force until nowadays, or modern day, in which each local hill has a name and is always invoked like the local guardian. The devils were believed to be from the underground and were known by either Abchanchu or Saksra. Other small gods reside in the water fountain. Another important aspect related to the Aymara spirituality is the ritual and natural medicine whose practices is carried out by the Yatiri, or the wise. The Yatiris, with the greater prestige and efficacy since ancient times until the present century are from the town Calawaya in the mountain range of Charasani in Bolivia. Again, this is saying the brief mention here about the Abchanchu is that they were just known as, quote, the devils or these underground ne'er-do-well spirits. They're on that side of the spectrum of like good or bad of spirits. And so they have their good spirits, which are in the hills and the mountains, and they're guardians. The opposite of that is the Abchanchu. I'm not exactly sure when or how that shift in the spelling or the pronunciation of the Abchanchu or the Abchanchu to the Abchanchu happened, but it did. The next one that we have here is from a Bolivia.com under their technology and astronomy kind of section of the site, and this is titled Abchanchu, the quote demon most feared by the Aymara people. And this says, evil in Aymara culture has a name, quote, Abchanchu, a malevolent entity that preys on lonely people and has an insatiable thirst for life. So we kind of know, we're getting this confirmation that those are one and the same. This says, quote, in the countryside, it is believed that people have up to 10 souls. Others say that women have 7 and men 3. With so many, they are vulnerable to being stolen until the last one is reached, and then there is death, explained anthropologist Milton Izaguirre. This continues, knowledge of this evil entity has been passed down orally in the Aymara regions and is one of the most feared because it leads its victims to death. Beliefs say that this, quote, paranormal presence appears to its victims personified as animals or terrifying beasts in order to frighten them. The wise men say you should pretend you're not alone. Quote, you have to pretend you're with someone because they use any trick to deceive you and drain your energy. You shouldn't be afraid of them, even though the moment is tense. Don't bother me, go away, you have to say to them, explained the Amauta Juan Carlos Bayon to urgente.bo. This wraps up. The Abchanchu wants to take away the Ajayu. It's spelled Ajayu, which I looked up, and there's also a link here in the Susto Google Doc. It's essentially like the life force or the soul. From this random site, when I searched it up, wordmeaning.org, it says it is a word in Quechua language, which means soul, spirit, cosmic energy, force, or entity that contains the feelings and the reason. This continues. The Abchanchu wants to take away the Ajayu from its victims, and for this reason, the most important thing is to control emotions in the presence of symptoms. This is going to sound really familiar. Some of the symptoms that the Amautas associate with the arrival of the Abchanchu are a common cold with headaches, general malaise in the body, appearance of pimples on the face, heaviness in the body, and chills. Any ailment can be cured. First, this says, again, sounds familiar, quote, any ailment can be cured. First, you have to change its fortunes. Consult the coca leaves to determine the cure and decide whether to use animals, minerals, or plants. The healing process and spiritual restoration are then carried out accordingly. When it's done in time, it can be cured. When it's too late, it takes longer and requires more ceremonies, Bayon concluded. That's Susto. That is literally, to me, that is what Susto is. So now we're going down the rabbit hole here. This is from a pmc.ncbi.nlm.nah.gov. So it's the National Library of Medicine, the National Center for Biotechnology Information, and this is a publication, this is a study, and there's a table here, but this study is titled Susto as a Cultural Conceptualization of Distress, Existing Research and Aspects to Consider for Future Investigations. This is published in, it says 2023, wow. And the names attached to this that I see here are Fanny Beatriz Martinez Rattle, Devin Emerson Hinton, and Ulrich Stangier. But what I found in this really quick search, there's a table here. Table 1, it says research that summarizes the definitions, perceived causes, symptoms, and management associated with Susto. So it seems like there is Susto in Bolivia. And that's what they're talking about without explicitly saying it, at least in the English translation of that site. But so I searched Bolivia, and the first thing that popped up on the table that said Bolivia, there's an author, field of investigation, population and location, definition of Susto, the perceived causes of it, and the symptoms of it. And so the author was Berman from 2010. It was an anthropology study. It says, Aymara indigenous people from El Alto in Bolivia. Again, the Aymara people as well. And the definition is that Susto is a spiritual disorder in which the person loses some component of their being, in parentheses, Ajayu. It all ties together. Okay. Okay, so I was right. It is literally Susto is what they were talking about. And the Ahayu is that kind of soul or the essence of the person. Interesting. There is nothing in this one line when it's talking about Susto and the Aymara people for the causes of it. But for the symptoms, it says fever, pain, skin rashes, asocial behavior, and strange manners, crying, and sleep problems in children. Wow. There are other parts of this that have Bolivia. Another one was Roldan, Chicano et al. In 2017. Transcultural nursing was the study. The location is Bolivian immigrants in Spain. It says Susto is a culture-bound syndrome. Participants considered Susto a disease in which the soul of the person gets lost, of course. This one, it does have causes. It says unexpected frightening events that cause the separation of the soul from the body, which is how pretty much I think I've always described it. Oh wait, I didn't even say earlier. I missed it earlier. Here you go. There was a how to, I guess, cure it. Yeah, the management of Susto. From that first entry that talks specifically about the Aymara people, it says calling the lost being with some food the affected person likes, a patient's clothes, or a woolen thread, and removing strange influences from the patient's body. Very interesting. Yeah, and there's all these different rituals. There was another one here, again, another anthropology study from Rosing in 1993. The location was traditional Kalawaya healers of Bolivia, which again we referenced earlier. And then all similar things. Okay, I was like, because I was reading through that page and I thought this is almost textbook of what Susto is. And so it made sense to me. And sure enough, I was able to, all I did was connect the dots. Okay, this next source is from Mythological Creatures. This one I thought was interesting because the representation of the Abchanchu it specifically describes different ways it can manifest here. So here it says, Abchanchu is a fearsome demon from Aymara mythology known for haunting dark, isolated locales and manifesting as both a red dog and a bald, pudgy older man. So the red dog is something we haven't heard in these other sources before. It says, he serves as a supernatural gatekeeper over precious minerals, enforcing a strict ritual for access. His chilling nocturnal appearances instill terror among those who dare to traverse the Andean wilds after midnight. So a lot of things in this site, again, mythologicalcreatures.net, are very similar to everything else, but I want to talk more about his form or how he is manifested. So here in this section, it says form and powers. It says, in many depictions, Abchanchu's physical presence is both startling and ambiguous, characterized by a striking red canine form that glows in the dim of the pre-dawn hours. This fearsome red dog, with its intense, almost supernatural aura, prowls the lonely landscapes with an air of menace and mystery. Yet, in other portrayals, the demon assumes a bipedal human guise, described as a pudgy, bald, older man who exudes a deeply unsettling presence. The human aspect of his form features weathered skin and piercing eyes that seem to reflect the depths of ancient wisdom and cruelty. His dual appearance blurs the line between animalistic ferocity and human cunning, inviting both dread and complex sympathy. Again, that line of sympathy. Some accounts detail subtle features such as a reddened complexion that hints at the molten energies of the earth beneath him. The physical contradictions in this portrayal contribute to a rich mythic ambiguity, challenging observers to decipher which aspect of his being holds sway in any given encounter. Overall, Abchanchu's dynamic and variable form reinforces his role as a liminal figure straddling the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural realms. For some reason, this entry spoke a lot about this idea again of those minerals, precious minerals, earthly resources. So this starts to delve into that area that we've spoken about before of these things, these spirits or cryptids or monsters, what have you, being protectors of the earth. And so this says, unlike many mythic entities that are solely malevolent, Abchanchu also encompasses aspects of protection and authority over natural resources. His dual nature as both a fearsome spirit and a custodian of subterranean wealth provides a complex insight into the Andean worldview. Over time, his multifaceted character has spurred diverse interpretations that reveal the intricate connections between nature, the supernatural, and human endeavor. And then something that I thought was really interesting here that sent me in a bit of a rabbit hole as well was this thing about a dance. And so it talks about, again, the protection of minerals, earthly resources. This part says there exists also a ceremonial aspect to his myth, most notably through references to the Dance of the Horns, a ritual that must be successfully negotiated in order to access hidden minerals. Thus, despite the fragmentary nature of these sources, they collectively underscore a complex tapestry of beliefs that has nurtured his legend over time. It's kind of like you can make a deal with him that if you do this dance, if you perform this dance, you get access to these minerals or these resources. There's another part of this that continues, and this is really the part that sent me on that rabbit hole that we'll dive a little bit into, is towards the end of this entry. It says, festivals and cultural performances occasionally incorporate elements of his myth, reimagining the traditional Dance of the Horns in new creative expressions. As academic interest in indigenous mythologies has grown, Abchanchu's narrative has been revisited and recontextualized within the framework of global myth studies. So again, the mention of this dance, right? So I looked it up because I've seen other parades where there are people dancing in these masks. Some of them look like handsome devils. Some of them just look like faces, but the ones that are dressed as devils, they have like the horse hair hanging off of their clothing and they look really cool. I'm going to maybe put a clip over that. But of course, I had to look into what this dance was. And so I found this site, this blackplatinumgold.com, and this entry is called The Truth Behind Bolivia's Dance of the Devils. And this talks about the origin and all that. So I was really interested. It says, every year for many centuries, a battle between evil and good is held over 12,000 feet above sea level in the small city of Oruro in western Bolivia. Dancers donned in technicolor and elaborate horned masks performed the so-called Dance of the Devils, or the Diablada, as they tried to defeat the Archangel Michael, only to fail in the end. While it might be the most thematically poignant and visually striking set piece of the festival, the Dance of the Devils is only among the many exciting features of the yearly Carnaval de Oruro. So, this Dance of the Devils happens in this Carnaval, and people were saying, or like it was mentioned earlier. And so when I looked up Dance of the Horns in Bolivia, this came up, this Dance of the Devils, because it's kind of, it's known as different names, or it gets translated or recontextualized into different names. So this continues, the origin of the Dance of the Devils. Most scholars have concluded that this unique dance had its origins in the Aymaran ritual of the demon Abchanchu and the Lama Lama dance honoring Tiwe, an Uru god. Both of these dances can be traced back to pre-Columbian Bolivia. However, there are several conflicting theories regarding the true origins of the dance. Although the dance had already been performed as early as the 1500s in the Andean region, its name started in 1789 in Oruro. So it was happening in the 1500s, but it didn't get an actual name until the 1700s. In Bolivia, where the performers wore costumes that resembled the devil in the parades known as Diabladas, so they were also known as that. It was in 1904 in Bolivia when the first ever organized Diablada group with a defined choreography and music appeared. There are also pieces of evidence pointing to the origin of the dance among the miners in Potosí, Bolivia. Chile and Peru's regional dances may have their influences on the modern version of the dance as well. So again, all these things kind of like falling in this timeline and just maybe changing a bit, or really the name or how they're known is what's changing. Is they're giving you names, they're given more structure. It's turned out into this Carnaval, right? And so this says the Carnaval de Oruro. The festival of Carnaval de Oruro has been observed by the indigenous Uru people since the pre-Columbian era, before the Upper Peru area's local customs were outlawed by the Spanish Empire during the 17th century. However, instead of disappearing, the festival learned to adapt as it incorporated religious dimensions and Christian iconography and became a model of syncretism among cultures. This reminds me of a conversation that I've had before about modern day like brujeria, hechiceria, curanderismo, or just general, I'll say, Mexican folk magic, and how the way that it exists today is basically a testament to its survival and the ways that it's had to assimilate. It's had to take on like Catholic iconography or practices in order to survive, because like it says here, those customs were being outlawed by the Spanish Empire. And if it wasn't that it was outlawed, then they were being erased by many different ways, either by death or by danger or intimidation. And so again, these practices take on some of its colonizers, I guess, identity so that it can keep on going. Okay, this continues. As a result of the extensive history of Bolivia as a crucial mining area, the festival evolved to become a tribute to the Virgen de Socavón, which is the patron saint who protects and watches over miners. UNESCO recognized the Carnaval in 2001 as a part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity and stated that the deteriorating mining activity in the region is among the different factors that threatens the indigenous communities in the area. However, the Carnaval itself doesn't show any signs of threat, as over 10,000 musicians and 28,000 dancers participate in the main procession or entrada that repeatedly traverses a route of 2.5 miles for 20 hours. The Dance of Devils may have seen cultural transformation and imperial oppression, but it has endured them all and continues to thrive year after year. Exactly what I was trying to say earlier. That was said so perfectly. Wow. Welcome back, Wolf Friends. I just want to address really quick. If you are watching the video version of this, I did have an outfit change. The lighting was a bit different because I had to stop mid-recording to go to a dentist appointment. So, speaking of scary things, I know some people are really scared of the dentist, but thankfully it was a filling that got chipped and it's going to need to be refilled, and that's fine. It's nothing worse than that. It could have been way worse. So I'm very happy, very fortunate that I could go to the dentist and take care of that. But just in case you were watching, you were like, why did he change? That's why. Okay, so thank you so much for listening. As always, you can support the show by sharing it with your loved ones, interacting with it wherever you are listening, or following on social media. That's at Susto Podcast on every platform, and leaving positive ratings and reviews. Reviews like this one from Half Sleeper 2018, who said, quote, "Great podcast." Thank you. I think so too. "I'm originally from Laredo, Texas, so I am all too familiar with these stories. I have also learned a lot of new ones. Reminds me of those summers making carne asadas and telling scary stories with friends and family growing up." I've said this before. This is my favorite kind of comment. I'm just trying to recreate that moment for us because I remember those nights. I can literally smell it. I can see the backyard and see everyone around me, see the cousins that I'm running around with, hear all like the commotion and people yelling and laughing, and then eventually it gets to that point in the night. So that means so much to me whenever I get comments like that. So thank you, Half Sleeper 2018. And if I read this comment before, I'm sorry, please let me know. I need to find a better way of keeping track of these. Thank you so much for, again, leaving that positive rating and review. It is always a big support and help to the show. You can also support the show for $3 or more a month by visiting patreon.com/sustopodcast and signing up for any of the paid tiers there. You technically can sign up to be a Patreon subscriber for free, but currently I don't have anything that I post for free on Patreon. So if you want the extra benefits and perks like early and ad-free access to episodes, then you can sign up for the base tier, and then it's up to you if you want to sign up for more. But just letting you all know, because I do see that I have free subscribers on there, but I don't really post much. Once in a while, I'll post something that's going to get posted on social media anyway. So it's up to you all. And while we were talking about Patreon, a major monstrous thank you to this episode's patrons. You are Liza, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, D, Josette, Sam, Mandy, Lori, Jeannie, Desiree C, Ashes, Neressa, Rachel A, Azucena, Marlene, Lainey, Desiree A, Ricardo, Vanessa, Maritza, Nieves, Mannermal, Iris, Mar, Flor, Selena, Nightingale, Clint, Rachel W, and Armani. Thank you so much for your support. As you know, it means so much to me. I will talk to you all in the next episode, and until then, no te asustes. Bye.